Hi, everybody. I'm Philip.
And I'm Rebecca. You probably know us as Mr. and Mrs. Seeker, and you can find our story on the Elliaison Forum. And we're really glad that you joined us today for our webinar series on the Principles of Peace. Today, our topic is the Circle of Perfection, and Philip is going to start talking about it first. Now, Philip is a scholar and scriptorian, and he has a special gift of being able to see systems and patterns in things and decode scriptural details that are commonly overlooked. So let's get right to Philip to start this topic off for us.
And before I go into the Circle of Perfection and start talking about that, I want to introduce Rebecca. She is absolutely an amazing woman. She's a spiritual giant, a seer. She has had connections with the spirit world and learned from both Jesus and her heavenly parents on many occasions. And revelation just flows through her so intuitively. It's a pleasure to work with her and love her and be married to her.
Thanks, Philip.
Just amazing. Well, the Principles of Peace, I want to go back into kind of an overview of the Principles of Peace for those of you who are joining us for the first time in this webinar series. The Principles of Peace are essentially the principles that were taught to Melchizedek, and he taught them to the people and created a society based and founded on these principles of peace, and that society was translated. And the reason they were translated is because they were living such godly lives, they had such peace and wisdom, they had come to a level in society where they were godly and godlike. And the principles of peace are the principles that Melchizedek taught the people and brought about this great society. These principles, and because he taught them, because he published peace by teaching the principles of peace, he became known as the Prince of Peace. And Elliaison learned these principles by revelation, and Rebecca and I have been asked to present these in the webinar series called The Principles of Peace.
And it's very interesting that a lot of these principles, as we've gone through this webinar series, you'll note that these principles are the foundation of what many are trying to create when they're trying to create Zion or their Zion societies. And you see many groups breaking off and trying to form this Zion society, but there's so many things that they're missing that after they've had it formed and they've been established for a few years, things start to fall apart and break apart because they have not learned these principles that are the foundation of a Zion society.
Yeah, and there's always something that comes up, and you'll see people kind of turning on each other, judging each other, figuring out that the other person isn't as perfect as they are.
And what these principles do, and especially this one that we're going to be talking about today, the Circle of Perfection, what this actually will do when more people apply it is it brings the entire world, not just your little tiny group of Zion, into a Zion-type mentality, and it helps you to interact with your neighbors and with the people that you're around every day, even if you haven't gone and to a little commune. It will help you to interact with them and bring that Zion to the space where you live.
And it's the principles of peace are calculated truths or truths calculated by design to bring peace.
So have you ever just felt like you just couldn't get that peace, with a neighbor or somebody in your church group, or, you just, they just
church group
drive
maybe.
you crazy. And you want to have peace and you want to have unity and you want to have connection with them, but either you don't get them or they don't get you, or there's something going on there. And have you ever just felt like you knew it was possible, but you just didn't know what to do? Well, that's how a lot of us have felt, and we've all gone through that at some point. And so we're going to tell you about some of the things that we've learned.
Yeah. Now, the Circle of Perfection is really cool because it's a compass for your own life, but it also helps you to understand the lives of others and accept others. So let's kind of look at the Circle of Perfection. We'll relate it to you, and help you see how it's a guide for your own life. And then we'll help you to understand how it becomes a principle of peace and brings about peace. Okay, so again, this is an Elliaison revelation, and we're presenting the circle of perfection. So to draw the circle of perfection, just go ahead and draw a circle. We've got a circle, and we're going to put a dot right in the middle. We'll explain what that dot is in just a minute. On the upper left corner, we're going to write the word wisdom. And the upper right corner, we're going to write power. And bottom center, we'll have love. And this is the balancing force of nature. You'll notice that wisdom, power, and love are all godly attributes. Now you'll notice that each of these godly traits is exemplified by a member of the Godhead. For example, we have power, that's God, wisdom, Holy Ghost, love, Jesus Christ. Now, while each of the members of the Godhead exemplify a particular characteristic, they are all and each encompass a characteristic. I mean, look at Christ. He's very powerful, he's very wise, and very loving. But it was his role to exemplify the love, particularly. God exemplifies power. When we think of God, we think of power. And when we think of the Holy Ghost, we think of wisdom. But God and the Holy Ghost and Jesus are all powerful, loving, and wise. But this is the circle of perfection. And the thing that we see here is that if you are imbalanced in one of these characteristics, then you are not in that perfect center. That dot in the middle is the perfect point. And it's the goal. The goal is to balance wisdom, love, and power in our lives. Balance those godly attributes. And you can take your own life and you can look at this this form or diagram and say, where in this diagram do I fall? Am I in the wisdom side? Maybe I'm somewhere between wisdom and power and I need more love. Or maybe I'm in the powerful and loving, but I'm not so wise. Maybe I'm wise and loving, but I don't feel like I have enough power. You can place yourself instantly in that circle, and you'll know exactly where you fall and what you need to do to get toward that perfection. So it's a compass in your life to help point you toward what you need to know for perfection. Now, you can also take it, just for example, let's say we pick somebody like Hitler. Hitler was extremely powerful, and whether you like it or not, he was also very wise. He was wise enough to get armies and countries behind him, backing him. He was really a good speaker. He knew the buttons to push to get followers, and so he was powerful and wise. But we all know he was lacking severely in love, and you can put him on that mark. Just drop a little mark where you would see Hitler being or falling in the circle of perfection. And if you were talking to Hitler, obviously you're going to tell him how to get to perfect point. You're going to say, well, dude, you need love. You've got to be more loving. And so that's what you would teach Hitler. And you can pick anybody in history that you know well enough to understand them. And let's say there was an abused wife. An abused wife would fall down toward the love side, and maybe she's lacking in wisdom and power, and maybe she isn't wise enough to get to know that she needs to get out, or maybe she's wise and loving, and she knows she needs to get out, but she doesn't have the power to get out of that abusive relationship. And so you might plot her in a different opposite course, or opposite point within the circle. And this is how the circle of perfection is a compass for your life. You can plot yourself in there. You can see exactly what you need to work on to get to that perfect point. And you can look for teachings, examples, doctrines, things that exemplify what you're lacking, and pay close attention to those things, because those are the things that you need in your life. If you are powerful and wise, you don't need more lessons on power and wisdom, because you will be pulled further out away from that point toward greater power and wisdom. You need love to go to the perfect center. And so if you are looking at teachings and looking for information that's going to improve your life, you really need to be looking for things that are going to teach you more love. And if you're wise and loving and you're getting abused maybe, you don't need to be told, be more loving, be more forgiving, be more generous, because you're already that, and that's why you're being abused. You need to be told, take more power, stand up for yourself, and you need to go to perfection by going toward power or gaining more power, learning those lessons and seeing the examples of the righteous and beneficial use of power. And you can, wherever you are on there, you can see how learning more of what you already are is going to take you further away from perfection, and learning the opposite, or what you aren't or what you need in that circle, will bring you toward perfection.
And as Philip was talking about an example of a woman in an abusive situation, we actually were friends with someone who was in that exact same situation, and she was in a relationship that was actually dangerous to her, and she was being abused, and a lot of people were in her church congregation were telling her, you've just got to love him, you've just got to love him. But what they weren't realizing is that the situation that she was in was actually very dangerous. And she felt frightened, and she thought, what am I going to do about it? And when we helped her to see where she fell on the circle of perfection, it was very easy for her to see that the advice that she had been given was very bad advice and put her in danger. And she could see that it wasn't a bad thing to take on more of a godly power in her life and to get herself out of the situation that she was in. And I think she got out really in the nick of time in that case. And so the results that we have seen that people have gotten from applying this to their lives are really, really amazing, and people have been able to improve their lives just by applying this very simple diagram. And really, the old way of doing it, of just giving everyone blanket advice, just a blanket statement of this is what you should do, is very detrimental to a lot of people. Like in the example of the woman, you could really cause someone to be badly damaged emotionally, physically, psychologically, spiritually, by telling a person to go in the opposite direction from where they really need to go because of where they fall on the compass.
It would be like telling Hitler, you need to be more powerful.
Right, right.
You don't exaggerate the things that you already are. You balance, and that's what the perfection's all about.
Exactly.
So you can see how this is a compass for your own life, and how you can even use it to help guide the lives of others. And what we want to show you now is how this is a principle of peace. So the way that this turns into a principle of peace is like this. Let's say, for example, let's use Hitler because we like Hitler. And we've got Hitler plotted right over here on the wisdom power side, more toward the power. And he's lacking a lot of love. And we've got the abused housewife over here, who's very loved, has a little bit of wisdom, but not any power. They're exactly in opposition to each other in relation to the circle of perfection. And they both need to move exactly the opposite direction in order to become perfect. We want to make sure that we're not telling them the same things. But here's what happens. Here's where war starts. In one instance, you'll hear a group teaching. A group will be teaching a principle that they know is true. And they are absolutely sold on. They know it's what they need to do, and it's going to bring them to heaven. And that principle is be loving. Be loving, be loving, be loving. And they look at Hitler and say, see, if Hitler was loving, he would have been a better person. And that's their only message. That's the thing that they resonate with. It works for them. It's what they need in their lives. And they preach it as if it is the only truth. And then there's another group that is like this little housewife who's being beaten and abused and hurt, and they feel very loving, but for them the truth is power. Take power in your life. stand up for yourself, be bold, do these things, take control. And they are teaching the exact opposite doctrine because it's right for them. And it's the truth for them. And it is their truth. It's absolutely correct. But when these two groups come in contact and they start coming together, and one says, be powerful, and the other says, be loving, and they start fighting each other because they don't realize that there are other viewpoints that are also true. Each group thinks that they have the only true viewpoint. And so and
the thing is, they're right.
They're right.
Their truth is right. And for a person that is in one place, that's exactly what they need to do. The person in the other place, it's exactly what they need to do. Both people are right. But what happens is...
And they both know they're right, which is what creates the challenge, because they know they're right. They know that this is the truth. They have a testimony of it. It's when they interact with others and don't realize there's other truths.
And they don't realize that the other person that they're interacting with is coming from a very different place. Now, we've seen this applied to neighbors, to parents with the children's teachers, to all sorts of situations. We had one person one time that was telling us all about how their child was being bullied at school, and the teacher, they recognized that the bullying was happening, yet they were giving the child advice that was causing the child to wind up being beat up further. Rather than standing up for themselves, they were telling the child, you just need to be more kind to the bully. It was a very unwise thing for the teacher to tell them to do, and it happens sometimes. But what would have been more wise would have been to take the bully and the child who was being bullied and explain this circle of perfection to them and explain to them where they needed to go. And often, especially with little children, they have been trained a certain way and they want to be loving, they want to be like Jesus. And so they've been taught to be a certain way. So when a bully comes along, someone that is willing to take power over them, they believe that to take power for themselves would be wrong, would not be Christ-like, and that's the way they're taught. And often the parents see it the same way. Rather than teaching that child, there is a way to take your power to yourself in wisdom and in balance and go that direction.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. That if you are taught in one area, and specifically that the right thing to do changes based on the circumstance. Yes, be loving. Yes, be wise. In this circumstance, where you are the dominant person, let's say you're the bigger person. Let's say you are a great big husband, you married this little bitty wife, or you're dealing with children. You're in a position of power just for your size. And in that position, you need to take on a role of love and wisdom more than power. That is the correct answer for that situation. But if that same person were found in another situation where somebody was trying to dominate and overpower them, the correct thing to do is to exemplify even more power to prevent that.
Right. Like we knew one person who in her youth, she was in an abusive situation. I guess an older child was trying to sexually abuse her. And she had been taught so thoroughly that she needed to be loving and forgive and turn the other cheek, that she was just doing that over and over and over and allowing the abuse to continue. And she just, as an adult, she had all this guilt and shame, and she was just completely broken up until she learned about this. And then she realized, oh my goodness, I needed to have taken my power, and it would have been loving for me to have taken my life into my own hands and fought him or told someone and got some help right away. It wouldn't have been that wasn't Christ-like. It would have been balanced. And to explain to especially a little child in that situation that they could be more perfect, more like Christ, by making sure that they loved themselves and took that power to love themselves into their lives and became that. So I'm hoping that you're seeing already maybe some examples and instances in your own life where you are coming from one place and you're getting advice, or you're reading scriptures and you're seeing certain things and you're saying, oh, I really should go that way. But I'm hoping you can see some places where you can apply wisdom and balance and know more what you need to do with the situations that are coming up in your life. And also, super important, is that when you're talking to other people, rather than seeing their situation from your perspective and your point of view, based on all of the life experiences that you have gone through, if you can try to see it from their perspective and seeing the life experiences that they've come from and gone through, so that you can see that the place that they need to go, the direction that they need to go for themselves so that they can be more perfect. And this actually takes us back. We wanted to cover a little bit more about how this works in neighborhoods and in organizations, groups, and even in nations. And Philip wanted to cover a couple more things on that.
Yeah, so when we have those two groups that are both each convinced that they have this particular truth, and they know it's true because they have a testimony of it, may even have a spiritual witness of it, and so they're teaching it as if their life depends on it, and they come in contact with each other, and now they start arguing with each other. And the group that's on the side of power that needs more love says, no, love is the greatest thing. We need to have love. We need to be more loving. If we could only be more loving, the whole world would be a better place. And they're right. But when you apply it to the other group that is very loving but being abused, they say, if everybody was loving, we'd all be getting run over and being bullied or whatever. And we really need to gain more power. We need to take our life into our own hands and direct our lives according to wisdom and power. And they're correct, but then they start arguing with each other. And the way that this principle, we hope, will create peace in you and in your interactions with those around you, is that you'll get into those situations where somebody is teaching a principle and they believe it. And you are looking at that principle and saying, no, that's not true. That's not right. Realize that it may be right for them, but it may be wrong for you. There are multiple truths, and one truth may apply to you at this stage in your life or in this circumstance, but not at other stages or other circumstances. And that truth may apply to somebody else at a time that it doesn't apply to you. And so accepting that two people can believe and teach exactly opposite doctrines, exactly opposite principles, and still be right. Two people can be moving in exactly the opposite direction, and both of them are coming toward perfection. And that's the key right there, is two people are moving in exactly the opposite direction, and both of them are moving toward perfection. And your truth, what moves you toward greater perfection, may move somebody else away from perfection. And so when you're advising people, when you're looking at and interacting with people, be aware of the circle of perfection and listen to them with the intent to understand where in the circle they are, so that you can understand where they're coming from and where they're going to get to perfection. We're all on the path to perfection. We all have the innate desire for good and the desire to improve and progress in our lives. And we really need to trust that the people we're interacting with, perhaps our enemies, perhaps the people who see the world different from us, are also good people trying to achieve what they feel is perfection or progress in their lives. And it may not match up with your views and your plans for perfection, but they may be doing exactly the right thing. And so this becomes a principle of peace because it helps you to understand and view others in a different light, in a light of acceptance and understanding and peace.
Yeah, that's exactly what you get once you really understand this circle of perfection. Now, some of the common mistakes that people make when they first learn about this is inadvertently judging others and assessing where they are on the path. It's really not our place to judge where another person is on the path. It's our place to accept what they feel and their beliefs about where they are, and to allow them their space, and to be conscious and present enough to do that, to allow another person their space without judging. And, another common mistake that people make is to start to argue with people about where they might be on the circle of perfection, or to argue with people about where you are, thereby trying to control what they say to you and what advice they give you. And it's really just not necessary to do those things. It's the best thing for you to do, and the thing that you can start doing right away, is you can just start looking at yourself and your life and seeing where you can apply this, where it's happening already, and how you can apply it in a very conscious, awake, and aware, non-judging way. And when I say non-judging, I'm talking about even not judging yourself. So not only do you need to not judge others now that you've got this new insight, but you really need to not judge yourself. You need to allow yourself to just be who you are and see where you are on this in a very allowing and loving way.
Yeah, you really, when you kind of work with this concept for a while, what you realize is you're constantly refining, constantly moving toward that perfect goal. And you, wherever you are today, in 5 years from now, you're going to be somewhere else, and you're going to look at it and say, wow, I could still be more this, and you're going to pick some place, and you're going to say, oh, I need to go to perfection by going more this way. But what you realize over time, as you apply it, is that it just refines and refines and refines, and that little dot in the center gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but you're always just a little off, moving some direction toward it. It doesn't, I mean, wherever you are today, in 5 years, hopefully you're closer to that dot. 10 years, hopefully you're closer to that dot, but maybe you're on the other side going the other direction. And the thing to realize is, or that I'm trying to express here, is that as time goes on and you apply the principles and you are refining yourself, it's almost like you're zooming in on the picture so that the circle becomes bigger, but you're still, no matter how close you are to that dot, you're still trying to find that perfect balance for your life. And so you're still working on it. And it's difficult to say that in 10 years from now, you might be closer to that dot, meaning you have gained more power or more wisdom in your life, or you've done something in that balancing act, but you're still not there. And not being there in 10 years is just as bad as not being there today. You might have learned lessons and you might have learned more, but you don't judge yourself and say, wow, I'm so far away from that dot. Because in 10 years away, 10 years from now, you're going to look at yourself and say, wow, you know what, I'm still kind of far away from that dot. I just need to keep improving.
And the Lord didn't reveal this to be used as a battering ram to hurt yourself
or others,
or to hurt anyone else. And so that's the big thing that we really want you to not do. Don't use this as a battering ram. This is a tool to get you to have more freedom, to get you to have a greater, a compass in your life. It's a tool, never a battering ram, never ever. And so we definitely avoid that, using that as a pitfall. Just give yourself space, allow yourself, use this as a tool to say, aha, oh, now I understand. I see why I'm thinking this way and my friend is thinking that way. Right away, start applying this and allowing it to be a tool to help you see that the other person you're interacting with is right from their point of view and their history and where they're coming from, and they may be exactly right for them, and you're exactly right for you, and there's no reason to go head to head. So use this as a tool to allow you to connect more deeply and more
Mm-hmm.
fully in your relationships so that you can have more love and more understanding of yourself and those that you associate with.
Yeah, and acceptance. We don't need to fight with other people the way that we have.
So that kind of wraps us up for this topic, and so now we want to
Answer some
open it up
questions.
to answer some questions. So if you have some questions, go ahead and put your hand up on the screen here, and we'll start taking some questions.
Now, we would like to kind of preface the questions with, please don't give us specific examples in your life that might require a deep dive into philosophical or emotional counseling. We're not here to counsel you at this juncture. This is more of a conceptual or a theological discussion around the concept of the circle of perfection.
Yeah, there are appropriate places where Elliaison has that option for more personal type of help, but that's not the place. This isn't the
Right.
place right here.
Yeah, and Rebecca and I actually do counseling with people from a spiritual viewpoint in which we utilize the circle of perfection. We understand how deep you can go into your personal life and issues, and we want to just kind of, the focus around the questions, we'd like to keep it focused on understanding and applying the circle of perfection, as opposed to applying it in your life or to specific situations.
Okay, looks like we've got some hands up here, so let's start taking some questions for a minute.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a question. This is a pretty common question, but what if somebody says something and you know they're wrong? So, well, this kind of starts to go into another subject called the root. We'll cover that in another webinar.
I think that's the next
I think it
webinar
is
actually in the series.
Yeah, I think it is the next webinar. So the root, this kind of question just tells us there's something called the root that you probably are facing, that you probably need to weed out, work that out of there. But basically, as far as the circle of perfection goes, if you're looking at it and saying, well, I know that they're wrong, you really need to just try to see it more from their point of view. Obviously, there are some things that we see as moral absolutes, but realize that just because something is our moral absolute doesn't mean that it's someone else's, and as painful as that may be in certain circumstances. There's some pretty specific things that come to my mind. But even if you do feel that they are exactly wrong, it doesn't mean that you have to live it in your life. And as long as they aren't infringing on you or your property or your family, they're not trying to interfere with your agency. Really the best way is to just live and let live, and to understand that they have had different experiences than you, and they are coming from a different place. Even if you can't see that, just try to remember that the place they're coming from is a different place.
Okay. Yeah. The next question is, you mentioned the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or God, Holy Ghost and Son. Could you go into that a little bit more? And yeah, I'll go into that. This framework is actually something you can study for some time, and it reveals all sorts of connections and intricacies. And we've kind of been playing around with it for a while and learning it. And some of the things that we've seen is power tends to be a father, wisdom, mother, child is love. And there's a couple interplays between the three aspects of God. For example, wisdom and power can be at odds, and they are united by love, united and balanced. They can be, like, think of somebody, for example, who is just angry and upset and just going off. They're so powerful, and they're yelling, and maybe they're hitting things. I mean, they're just exemplifying power. No wisdom. They're completely unconscious as far as that goes. They just aren't thinking. Maybe they're throwing their arms around, they're shouting or whatever. Full of power. No wisdom whatsoever. Maybe you have somebody who is completely just wise, but doesn't do anything. Rebecca and I, getting ready for this, we're actually talking about somebody who was very wise and very loving. They were just amazing in wisdom and loving and lovingness, and we never heard about them because they didn't have the power to change the world. So all those hundreds of thousands of people out there who are wise and loving, and we don't know about them because they're not powerful to take action or to change the world or to teach. And so wisdom, somebody might be very, very wise and not have power. And oftentimes they'll be wise and they'll feel that power is a bad attribute to have. But it's a godly attribute. But they feel that it's a bad attribute because they've seen people who are overpowerful use it poorly. And the thing to realize is, if you were to flatten the circle of perfection so that the top of the circle went straight down to the bottom, became a line, what you'd see is wisdom and power on the outside and love is in the middle, because the balancing force of wisdom and power is love. And you can turn that circle around any direction and flatten it.
I was going to say, you could turn it around and you could smash it down and have power in between wisdom and love as the balance.
As the balance.
Or
it always balances correctly.
Or wisdom in the middle between love and power, and it can be a direction.
And it balances. It is...
you can deconstruct and rotate this circle any way you want, or you can reposition those words, and it'll apply differently.
Yeah, you can write. There's just so many ways to apply it and look at it and understand the interaction between wisdom, love, and power. And you can see that each of them are godly attributes. They're all good, but when imbalanced, they can be used badly or to create harm in our lives or in the lives of others, or both.
Okay, so it looks like we've got another question here. Someone is asking, but isn't being too far in the wisdom, isn't that just pretty much hold on just a second. Is being too far in the wisdom just over mentalizing everything? So I think basically, if I'm correct in reading this question, it looks like what you're asking is wisdom just mentalizing everything? The answer is yes and no. Wisdom is not just a matter of being, stuck in your brain. Although thinking through things, having common sense is definitely wise, and practicing that common sense is definitely wisdom. But wisdom, the term wisdom, can actually go much deeper than just common sense or just thought. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily mean you're an overly mental person if you're super on the wisdom side. Wisdom means that you know the right thing to do in the right mm-hmm. situation. Mm-hmm. And so you can be a wise person and not be overly mental, although, definitely we use our minds as a tool to think through things, and that's very important. But wisdom actually is more than just a person who is overthinking everything.
Yeah, it's not the physics geek or the rocket scientist or brain scientist, brain surgeon type of wisdom. It's like Rebecca said, knowing what to do in the circumstance, the right thing to do in the circumstance. One of the examples we use is a person who is a parent, for example, who's very loving and very powerful, and they see their child get into trouble. And rather than allow the child to suffer the consequences of their actions so that the child learns for themselves, the parent is unwise and is very loving and powerful and protects the child from the natural consequences of their actions. So the child ends up not learning, And I've seen this, I don't know how many times. I guess
Over and
we've seen
over.
this. I'm sure you've seen it, where a parent will just shelter their children all the way till they're 18, and then that child gets all this freedom, and they go out and do just terrible things to their lives and make tons and tons of poor decisions because they don't have the wisdom. They didn't gain it growing up because their parents were so loving and so powerful in their life that they loved them and protected them from the harm that they would have brought themselves. And so the child didn't learn the necessary lessons of life. So the wisdom in this case is the wisdom that we're talking about isn't just brainiac, reading books and thinking about physics. It's the what to do in the right situation. In this case, it's in order to raise a child properly, you need more than love and power. You need to be wise enough to determine when to interrupt their process and when to just let it be. And so the wisdom isn't just a common sense, and it could be revelation, it could be intuition, it could be philosophy, it could be theory, it could be all these different things, but it also comes down to what is right in the right moment. You won't just lovingly, powerful, and wisely watch a child walk out into a street and get hit by a car and say, well, they'll learn from that. You've got to apply wisdom in the right situation at the right time. Love and power needs to be applied at the right situation in the right time. So that's the wisdom.
So we have another question here about power. The person asks, isn't power just a form of being controlling? No, that's not the kind of power we're talking about. Obviously, there is a level of control that can come with power, but power can be something more along the lines of the ability to take action. The ability to have personal power to take action on the things that you need to take action on or want to take action on. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, power isn't necessarily like you're in a marriage relationship and you take total control of your spouse or you want to have power over your children, meaning you control their lives.
Dominate them.
You may have amazing power with your children because you love them and because you respect them and because you listen to them. So that's a very powerful person who applies those attributes in a powerful way. So no, power is not just about being a controlling person and having everything your way all the time and dominating. Exactly.
Cracking the whip.
Power can be a very, very amazing point in this circle of perfection, and definitely when it's used with those other things, it's definitely not just a controlling, tyrannical thing. However, it could be a tyrannical thing if you don't have the other aspects in balance with your power. You could be a tyrant. So it could be that way, but definitely power can also just mean the ability to act.
And you have to remember, each of these attributes are godly attributes. These are attributes of God. And so what we've seen is people who shy away from or feel concerned about gaining one of these attributes, like they've seen the dark side of the attribute. And there's dark sides of it, it's called imbalance. And they've seen that imbalance, and that witness of imbalance has made them say, oh wow, I want to stay away from this power thing. Or I've seen wise people, they're this thing or they're that thing. And if you feel that you're afraid of a particular attribute or concerned about a particular attribute, what you want to do is realize that that is a godly attribute, and you should find the godliness in it. If you don't, then what it would mean, for example, in an instance, in a situation where you're pushing power away, then you're going to find yourself in the love and wisdom side of the circle, moving away from the circle of that center perfection point toward deeper love and deeper wisdom, and you'll continue to do that until either you get hurt or find the error in that extreme and turn back toward power, or until you discover the godliness of the attribute of power.
But it's a lot easier to just see where you are on the circle of perfection and go toward the center point rather than, willingly of your own free will and choice, rather than waiting until life is so painful that you start to see, oh, I'm out of balance.
Yeah.
I'm doing something wrong. It's far easier in life to grow through conscious choice than pain and sorrow. So we are out of time for today, did you have anything else to cover?
Nope.
I think that we're going to have to take everything to the next subject in the next webinar, so we're going to wrap it up for today.
Yeah, if you have further questions, go ahead and put them in the comments.
Or in the forums. We can discuss it out there.
Yeah, we can discuss the circle of perfection and kind of dig deeper into it. This is kind of a really good overview, and I think we've covered it pretty well.
Pretty well. So we are so glad you joined us today. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your participation. And be sure to go out there and feel that love and be conscious with everyone you interact with. And have a great week, guys.
We'll see you on the next webinar.